Hey guys, and welcome to episode 2 of Capital Chat. So today I'm here down in Tuggeranong, or more specifically in the suburb of Chisham. Now Chisham gets its name from Caroline Chisham, who is a famous charity worker. She helped get a lot of women help establish their lives in Australia. And that got me thinking a lot about charity. Now, more specifically government charity. Now, obviously, a lot of you guys would have probably heard the news in the US recently that the Doge department run by Elon Musk has basically nuked USA. And a lot of the comments out of that destruction of US aid comes to US money should go to US people, which has got me thinking, is that a common sentiment with people? Do people think that Australia should really only spend its money on Australians? Like, should all money, like, is foreign aid bad? And I can sort of sympathise with this. Like, sure, it's nice to see houses getting built, in Fiji and stuff, but, it'd be nice if I could have a bit of money taken off my rent. So I decided I wanted to run a poll with you guys to see how you feel on the topic of aid, or specifically government-given aid, not private charity or stuff you do personally. I'm talking specifically the Australian government giving money to other countries to help, establish themselves or improve their lives. And I was actually generally surprised by the results. When I polled it, 71% of you guys believed that we should be giving a sizable amount of our money to aid. And I put sizable anywhere from like 0.1 to 5%, so a noticeable part of our budget. Only 19% of you guys said we should be spending less than 0.1%, like only loose spare change. We spend only spend the spare change. We should keep most of the money for Australia. Only 19% of you guys thought that, and only 10% said there should be no aid at all, which generally surprised me. I thought this poll was going to be a lot more even. Now, I could be wrong, because I think obviously my subscribers, I think, are predominantly Labor and Greens voters, so it doesn't surprise me maybe that much. I mean, it's still quite large. But yeah, it definitely was an interesting result, even with my more lefty-leaning audience. So basically, I wanted to have a look at what the current state of aid is and sort of give you my thoughts before reading what some of your comments were as well. By the way, thank you for those who did give me comments. So basically, apparently as it currently stands, we spend 0.19% of our gross national income on aid, which is around, where I think it was. I think it might have been a little bit high, but I think the Liberals cut back on it a lot in their last term, because it's an unfortunate reality that aid is such an easy, low-hanging fruit for savings, because it's not money going to Australians, so no one really complains when less money goes to Fiji or Tonga or another Pacific island. However, with that being said, there are two arguments to aid, and I think I'll go through the obvious easy one, which is the charity one, and then I'll go to the later one, which is the more practical stuff. Look, we are a nation with problems. I'm not going to lie, we don't have a cost of living crisis here, that things are arguably worse than they were, say, back in 2019. But at the same time, things are a lot worse in our Pacific neighbours. And while it'd be nice to pay a bit less in rent, to get a bit more, to spend a little less money at the shops, at the end of the day, I want to see at least some of that money go to helping people that are doing it way tougher than me. It's the same for poor Australians. I could demand money for myself over poor Australians, but I won't, because I know those poor Australians need it. And the same goes for people living outside of Australia. My charity doesn't stop where the Australian border is. And I think I got from a lot of my audience that you guys feel the same way. But a moral argument can only go so far. We can't demand people be charitable. I think we can all agree on that. It's not fair to demand people be at a level of charity that you're willing to give, because some of them can't. Some of them are generally poor Australians that are doing it really, really tough. Arguably maybe more tougher than some of these people in these Pacific Islands that we often give aid to. And now you might notice I talk a lot about the Pacific Islands over Africa and stuff, but that's predominantly because Australia's aid is mostly aimed at these Pacific Islands, partly because we're obviously the major power in the region, and you can leave Africa and those places to Europe and American aid more so, although I do think Australia does send a bit of money there. So let's also talk a bit more about the practical reasons behind aid. And one of the main ones they're saying is and we'll see a few of you guys in the comments here, is by helping these countries become more developed, we are encouraging them to become more bigger trading partners. When these people are suddenly, earning, have more money, have more spending power, they'll then buy more Australian things, and this in turn helps our economy. So there's generally, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and I think not so much in the Pacific as much, but I've definitely seen it in places like Europe, where countries like Poland, which were very impoverished after breaking out of communism, have since become developed countries themselves and are now able to start giving aid themselves. And I think that is a great success story. And I think it's one of the many reasons why I think aid is good. And I think it's maybe not having seen it as much here, but I do think I do think these Pacific Islands are able to have more spending power and be more profitable. There's also the geopolitical reasons, and I think we saw a lot of this in the lead up to the 2022 election, when I believe it was Samoa signed a deal. Was it the Solomons? Sorry, it was the Solomons signed a deal with the Chinese government to allow them to dock warships there. Now, I'm not the biggest one on geopolitics and putting Australia, making everyone subservient to Australia, but I think a lot of people, especially more on the right side of politics, do have that feeling that we want to be a country that we want to make sure that our neighbours are supporting us and not a potential hostile foreign power. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why we want to make sure that we are supporting. And I know I think straight after the 2022 election, Foreign Minister Penny Wong did she's done I think more journeys to Oceania than any other foreign minister in recent history or something like that. She's definitely been very focused on over the relation. And foreign aid is part of that relationship. We want to make sure these countries see Australia as an ally, and rather than potentially, say, a China or something. And so that's just a few of the reasons. But I'm actually curious to know what you guys think. So I basically had a look at some of your comments, and I'm just going to read through them. I'm basically going to give my opinion on how I feel about your comments. So the first one comes from AwesomeWav2419. He says, supporting others who need it also helps Australia. People around the world living a better life ideally makes the world overall better, and not just wealthy countries being well off. Investing in other people puts less strain on wealthy nations. For example, eliminating disease, preventing the issue from getting worse, and spreading Australia. So yeah, that's one I didn't mention, was the disease one. I think it's a big focus on US aid, that a lot of it was going to disease prevention in Africa, and the concern is if you're not preventing these diseases here, they can grow, mutate, and then escape the country, and then before you know it, we have coronavirus 2.0, and that's definitely something you want to do. You want to stamp out the diseases where they are so that they don't become global pandemics. So I do agree with that one, and obviously the rest of it he mentioned, everyone being wealthy is just a better system to be in. Having a few people own all the money is just not a healthy system to run. Anyway, the next one is NoSag127. He says, but the main goal should be geopolitical influence, not charity. It's a tool to help poor, yes, but also benefit foreign relations and therefore taxpayers. So very much playing to the more practical side than the emotional side of charity. And I don't entirely agree with. I do feel like there is I feel like I have a charitable need towards this, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of that 71% were coming from a charitable side, less so just a you scratch my back, I scratch yours sort of a deal. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to argue that we come to the same conclusion, so I'm not going to argue with your reasoning to that conclusion. Next up we have Nefarious Pair, who says, making the region your economy operates more stable is pretty solid economic reasoning, even before you introduce any moral arguments. It's when you start throwing it at stuff that has no relation to you, that isn't there, the same emphasis on getting it right, because there's no real consequences if you screw it up. This is where foreign aid could be worse, flushing money down the drain. I don't know, maybe tariffing is the actual answer. Well, I don't know about that last sentence, but definitely, yes, we can screw up for it. I think we can screw up any government program, and that's why I'm as much as I have issues with, say, Elon Musk and his Doge, I do agree that we want to minimise fraud. And minimise fraud, you always make sure money you're getting bang for your buck. So yeah, I don't mind auditing foreign aid and making sure it's going to practical purposes. So yeah, I do mostly agree with that. Obviously, yeah. Why I don't think we should, nuke foreign aid. I do think we should make sure it's going to where it needs to. And I think a lot of the case it does. It's under a lot more scrutiny because it's not going to Australians. And I think you see in the end that it does actually get a lot of, I think they were showing that, I'm not sure about Australia, but I know in the US when they're looking at a lot of what US aid was doing, it was actually, getting a lot of stuff done for very little. Anyway, next one we have is Sagalina, I think it is, which says, I think it's particularly important to help our nearby neighbours as we are the big country in this part of the world. What is only a small amount of money costs can be a huge amount of difference outside of countries. I'd rather be money spent on foreign aid than foreign wars. Well, I totally agree with that last sentence, absolutely. But yeah, it's the other thing. Again, that's more of the moral argument that I was making at the start, which I think at the end of the day, most of my support for this aid is more of a moral one, even though it does also have practical reasons. So yeah, not really much to disagree with there. Totally agree with the sentence. This one is Harry Oliver, says, next one we have Harry Oliver, who says, I was once quite isolationist in my thinking of this kind of thing, but I imagine the refugees crisis of Pacific Island countries weren't having the economy/budget subsidised by countries like Australia. In the end, the government is not benevolent to the international stage. It's in the interest of the Australian people. So again, to the practical reason, and something I didn't mention is stopping refugees. Now, I want to be careful what I say here, but it is true that when a large number of people come into a new country, you get a lot of social unrest, and we ideally don't want to be in a world with refugees. I want people to be happy in the country they live in. The only people I want to see coming to Australia aren't people fleeing war. It's just people looking to say, oh, I've got a skill set, there's a place in Australia that needs my skill set, I'm going to apply to move to Australia. Or just people just want to live here because it's oh, Australia looks cool, I want to live there. Those are the kind of people I want coming. In some ways, I don't want refugees, and the way to stop that is to prevent there being refugees. And I think foreign aid is a great way to, make sure these countries are stable and not turning into war-torn environments, or in the case of, say, the Pacific, basically being sent underwater by rising sea levels. So I agree there's another reason on the practical side of why we want to support aid. And next one we have is Greenlatch, who says, it's vital to ensure that at least some level of hygiene, regular food and education health is in our world's poorest countries. It also allows us to use soft power. So yeah, again, playing to both the moral and the practical reasons of why we should do foreign aid. But yeah, I don't know how many people stand by things like the UN Convention on Human Rights and everyone should have access to clean water and stuff. Again, I'm not sure how other people feel about this, but yeah, I agree. We've been able to meet the basic standards of a civilized country. I think we should be able to give those standards to other countries, or we should feel like we want to do that. Next thing we have Faze Greg Paul, who says accumulation of wealth at one. Oh yeah, sorry. So we have Faze Greg Paul, who's using a Marx quote. I'm hopeful this is not too bad. Who says accumulation of wealth at one pole is therefore at some time accumulation of misery, agony, and toil and slavery and ignorance, brutality, mental degradation at the opposite pole. Yeah, I think I would be careful to say I agree with the statement by Marx, but I think that's an all right statement. I think most people would agree with. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's it's a terrible system to make 10% really happy at the expense of the 90%, and that's why I want to be in a world where everyone has a good standard of living. And again, moral argument more so than a practical argument. Anyway, the final comment we have is Taranaki, who says, I wonder if he's New Zealand actually, he grew up in New Plymouth near Mount Taranaki. Anyway, he says, well targeted aid is important too. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So yeah, that classic quote, which I can't remember where it actually comes from. Someone in the comments can let me know where that comment comes from. But yeah, pretty much agree with that one as well. So yeah, I was again generally surprised that a lot of you guys are very supportive of this. I've seen a lot of comments on social media being very critical of aid, saying our money should be spent on our country, not other people. And so it was definitely a bit of a surprise, and I'd say it actually warms my heart a bit that a lot of people feel this way, that we should be decently giving money even in a cost of living crisis. So I do thank you guys for your response, and I hope you guys enjoyed this second episode of Capital Chat. I'll see you in a few weeks for my next episode. Until then, so long for now.